Hello, this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to my Politics 2100 channel here on YouTube. So this episode I'm calling CBO, Congressional Budget Office, and then in parentheses, business accounting methods, shortchange the future, semicolon, use macroeconomic accounting. So I am trying here to, and this is a topical point because we have the big infrastructure plus budget reconciliation bill now being discussed in Congress, and actually both of those bills have been put through the CBO accounting, Congressional Budget Office accounting process, and they both have passed that. I mean, the reconciliation package hasn't been finalized, and so potentially that could be rejiggered. But anyway, so what the Congressional Budget Office does is it uses conventional business accounting to say a government program either loses the government money or gains it or just balances the ledger for any given proposal by Congress. And the idea is that it's based on business accounting, where a business has only a certain amount of money to give out, and it or to get on credit or any number of different ways. And so it's trying to, accountants in a business try to balance the books, and eventually if the books don't balance over a period of years, the business can go bankrupt. But the U.S. government, the U.S. federal government, cannot go bankrupt, and for that matter, this accounting procedure is counterproductive to the functions of the U.S. government. And this is a heterodox view. So what I'm saying is true in the sense of when you look at the history of the U.S. economy and how the government has spurred and shaped the economy and basically led it in some ways or another, not always leading it, but has shaped and managed it in different ways, and created the wealth that Americans currently enjoy in some regard. So not all, again, the wealth is radically maldistributed, and also there are some forms of wealth that one could consider to be parasitic and counter to actual real wealth that one would want to see in an economy, and real prosperity, and especially in the era of climate change and ecological imbalance of enormous proportions. You would want to see a different way to measure those things. But anyway, given the current way we use money and the way our economy works, the government has led and is leading the economy in different ways. And one of the ways it does is it runs deficits. It net contributes to the economy. But what CBO accounting does, it says, no, that net contribution shouldn't exist at all. So it lives in a fantasy, even though it seems very, very sensible and hard number focused, and these are all paid fors, and everything is paid for. And this is you could call it a kabuki theater, you could call it but in any case, every bill has to go through this process, even though some bills that are passed eventually do add to the deficit in different forms, and that's either unaccounted for or it's tut-tutted and so forth and so on. But that actual net contribution is a benefit to the private sector, which is and the private sector being all of us, not there are businesses in the private sector, but also households. And so the purpose of government is in a way to benefit the citizenry, okay, which in this case happens to be, quote unquote, the private sector, and as well as businesses. So the CBO accounting flies in the face of this idea. So basically what I'm saying, it shortchanges the future. It also shortchanges the people all the time. In other words, it basically is shortchanging not just future people, but real people now in the next year or so. So I shortened the title. It could have been longer. But anyway, this accounting method is is backwards, okay, and it's like using a hammer to try to a screw in or something, or and it's just the wrong. It's a category error in philosophical terms, and I mean we're lucky. John Yarmouth, who's the budget chair for the House, the chair of the House Budget Committee, is now interested in modern monetary theory, and maybe he will consider changing the method of accounting, or maybe he will advocate for that once he understands and puts into. I mean, and he can't do it alone, but anyway, once we have more people in Congress who understand, and political leaders who understand the function of government and how it works to manage the macroeconomy, and that the whole idea of balancing the ledger goes against the role of government. And so for now, just to go back briefly to the bill that we have currently that's being debated and being negotiated around, actually the pay-for, so the ironically, and this is, I'm going to create another video about this phenomenon, but the pay-fors are actually very, very popular. And this is paradoxical because people in general are not going to benefit much from those pay-fors. In other words, the pay-fors, the taxing the rich, the taxing the corporation, it serves people's sense of cosmic justice. They're not a bad thing to, it's not a bad thing to have a more progressive taxation system at all. I'm for it. But the actual benefit of a spending bill, or a bill that includes spending, is the spending part. And so, and the pay-fors are, you know, they might serve people's sense of cosmic justice or real justice in terms of taxation, but they don't give direct benefit. And there's a long-standing tradition of trying to equate the benefit of any policy program to the tax, or making it all contingent on how the taxes look, okay, and how the tax policy changes look based on that bill. And so anyway, I have proposed in the past, and I will continue to propose, that government leaders use what I call macroeconomic accounting. So macroeconomic accounting, it's an idea I formulated, but it's just the next logical step from what I was just saying about the government. You don't want the government using an accounting method that shortchanges the people and who are the raison d'etre of the government itself. In other words, so lawmakers go through all this effort to sort of do something to serve the people or serve their donors, okay, which is bad, okay, which we don't want. But anyway, to serve a constituency, let's hope it's the American people. And then what the government accounting, or the Congressional Budget Office does is it says, well, you know, let's find a way to either shortchange or trim the benefits that this bill is supposed to have. So it will have net, in terms of the actual outflow of funds, okay, a zero from government, a zero net benefit to the people, the citizenry, and so it's like coming in and it's a fiction. It's based on a fiction that the government will run out of money, which it won't. So and nor should it, and nor, you know, there should be prudent use of government money, and that's something that, anyway, that this macroeconomic accounting proposal, and it's something that needs to be fleshed out. It would need to have a team working out the details of macroeconomic accounting, and there could be hundreds of different versions of macroeconomic accounting, but it is a general principle proposal that the government should make accounting of the real assets or the real consequences of any given policy as being the determinative measure, okay, of whether that bill should be passed. In other words, so what CBO accounting is measuring financial assets, and because the government can create financial assets out of thin air, it doesn't really, the whole idea of accounting for them as purely a matter of accounting how many financial assets were given out, and then how many are we taking back by taxation. That makes doesn't make zero sense, but it's only should be only one slice of what I'm calling macroeconomic accounting. In other words, the net contribution, rather than deficit, by the way, net contribution of the government to the broader economy should be counted, okay, but it shouldn't be zero in most cases. In other words, the net outflow of money, or the net injection of money into the economy shouldn't be zero, especially now. This is a political statement. In other words, I have a political orientation. I think the government has to lead the climate transition that we absolutely need, and government therefore will be creating public assets that require large outflows of net contributions to the society, to the either to contractors or to individuals who become government employees, or contractors being people who, let's say, build solar farms or build transmission lines across the United States and out into the ocean, so we can use offshore wind to power the economy, so we don't use fossil fuels. And so now some of those things could be private companies could decide that that's profitable for them to do. The government would need to create all kinds of frameworks that would make that happen at a speed that we require to really address climate change. So even if you conceive of a privately owned wind farm out in the Pacific Ocean somewhere, or in the Atlantic Ocean, you would need to create the transmission infrastructure, and also probably some incentives and for them to do that investment, and also the contractors, the actual people who physically, engineers who physically would design, and then workers who would put together that physical piece of infrastructure that could be publicly owned. Part of it could be publicly owned, part of it could be privately owned. Right now, I am thinking that the climate transition will have a mixed economy approach to it, but ideologically, you could conceive of it all being all publicly owned. I don't. Right now, for me, the most important thing is to get the physical, also with equity, obviously with equity in mind, with employment opportunities, with in terms of helping working people gain back some of the territory, or the income they lost, or the wealth they've lost over the last 30, 40 years in our economy. And all of those things can be built into that. But the impetus, or the beginning of that, is the government spending money and injecting the money into the economy. That's the motor, okay? And so I'm saying the motor can be governed, could be by this macroeconomic accounting. Well, the motor is already there and is already doing things. It's just doing things in a corrupt way, or in a way that doesn't serve either the vast majority of the people in the United States very well. Marginally it already does, but in a way, in a very backhanded way, and also the tasks that we need to do as people in the 21st century, in this part of the 21st century. So anyway, so the macroeconomic accounting is looking at, so what are, for instance, one measure, and that would be what are the carbon costs versus the carbon cutting, the greenhouse gas, using carbon as a shorthand for greenhouse gas emissions, because carbon could be carbon dioxide, could be methane, could be even nitrous oxide, so it's not really carbon even in that greenhouse gas, but or other warming gases of various kinds. So the net a macroeconomic accounting framework could look at the land use changes. Okay, so any change in real assets. So also real assets being or real consequences. The changes in financial benefit to the people rather than to the government are part of macroeconomic accounting. So it's not just physical, non-financial assets. There are accounting for the changes in income distribution from a particular policy. All of that should be part of what I'm calling macroeconomic accounting. So built into it is the idea that the government is caring about and protecting the people, okay, which is part of the mission of government. So CBO accounting doesn't address, it says no, we're not responsible for that. So either government is or isn't responsible for protecting the American people, and CBO accounting comes in and saying, whatever, we're not here for protecting you. We're just here to make sure the books or the ledger is based on a false idea about what the government can afford, okay, and it therefore and there are all and legislators, including progressive legislators, some who are concerned about climate change, like Bernie Sanders, are bend heaven and earth to get the right score, CBO accounting score. Okay, so this is a bass-backwards approach to government accounting, and it creates a culture in the Congress of legislators, trying to prove that their quote unquote their legislation is paid for as if it's a virtue. Okay, and I am trying to create a framework of accounting virtue that actually serves the American people. Okay, so that's me. I don't know if I don't want to be alone in this. Okay, but I happen to have come up with this framework or this idea of macroeconomic accounting. I need more tools to and time and so forth and so on and I would need the buy-in of people with some more power than I have to actually make it a reality. But anyway, this framework that I'm suggesting is that government should account for any the inequality. I mean, now the composition of macroeconomic accounting, it will be a political. It's much more objective than CBO accounting in one sense, even though CBO accounting is a simple number and it looks so objective. But actually, we're looking at the real world, and so macroeconomic accounting is looking at what are the measures in the real world that government should be paying attention, like net warming effect of this bill. Okay, some bills will have a zero net warming effect. It's like it's some rule change, of some, whatever law, and it has, but you just do the macroeconomic accounting on it, and that will be zero, and, whatever, because it's some abstract thing about, this law is about changing, putting putting it, this period here rather than there. I mean, I'm being trivializing what a law would be, but anyway, some law or other that changes a procedure in the VA when you do, I don't know, something internal to the Veterans Administration. So, but anyway, the anything that is related. So carbon is a big one, okay, but inequality is a big one. We can list, and I have listed, and I will put a link in the description. What are some likely candidates in this macroeconomic accounting package, and you could distill out of that what people call the GPI, or general progress indicator. So that's something that people use as an alternative to GDP. Okay, and GDP could be GDP is not a trivial measure. It's not doesn't really describe true prosperity and true economic health, but it is, and it like for instance, the United States' GDP numbers make our economy look better than it is. But there are countries with lower per capita GDP that are, in my opinion, wealthier overall in sense of they're wealthier in terms of the people on the ground. The ordinary people have a higher standard of living than typical Americans. But anyway, a GPI is an alternative which looks at some real and a GPI is also something that is composed politically, so it should be transparent. In other words, I think I think it could be a site of great struggle between the Democrats and the Republicans. So in a way, Republicans will object to the whole idea of macroeconomic accounting because built into the concept of the government leading the economy is a political acknowledgement of a real reality, but the politics of the GOP is about denying that but using it, sequestering it for the wealthy. So they use the leadership capacity of government to serve their own very narrow interests. It's extremely selfish and egocentric and narrow, and it's morally indefensible use of government and attempting to basically to keep it for the very wealthy and the big corporations and themselves, their own enrichment. And and there are also some Democrats who have a similar view of that. So it's not just Republicans, but I think that people need to, that this proposal needs to be get out there, and so people can judge for themselves, whether they are not powerful people can judge whether this is going to be helpful. And I think it probably would be introduced as a alternative or as a parallel accounting method that eventually should replace the CBO accounting. So it would have to be sort of a face-off between the two methods. Either that, or it becomes a political issue, and whatever the people decide. I think it's an enormous political issue. I think people on the ground, even though this sounds very inside baseball, this is the difference between a government that transparently serves the people versus a government that is used primarily to benefit oligarchs and big corporations. And so it's one of the biggest democracy issues that we would have. So I think it should be inscribed on people's banners and people should fight for it, even though it sounds terribly arcane. And it's not. It's a big deal. And even the very progressive legislators in our current system are not yet, I think, behind it, because it's still being proposed. Okay, but anyway, I'm out there, and I will continue to propose it and continue to advocate for it, and I hope others will take up the fight as well. So anyway, please share your thoughts and comments below in the comments. And also, if you like the video, please like it. And if you're enjoying the content here on Politics 2100, please subscribe. See you in the next video.